My name is Rebecca, and I'm 28 years old. Last Christmas morning, while my younger brother Marcus unwrapped a brand new Rolex Submariner worth $15,000, I opened a box containing rubber gloves, toilet bowl cleaner, and a set of scrub brushes. My parents watched with satisfaction as Marcus's face lit up with joy, while I sat there holding cleaning supplies like some kind of cruel joke. What they didn't expect was how that moment would become the catalyst for everything that followed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in the affluent suburb of Westfield, Connecticut, our family appeared to have it all. My father, Jonathan, was a prominent cardiac surgeon at Yale-New Haven Hospital, while my mother, Patricia, managed her own successful interior design firm. Our colonial-style home on Elm Street was featured in Connecticut Magazine twice, complete with Patricia's signature blend of traditional elegance and modern sophistication. Neighbors often commented on how picture-perfect we seemed, with our matching holiday decorations and coordinated family outfits for church on Sundays. But behind our mahogany front door, a different reality existed. From my earliest memories, I understood that Marcus and I occupied completely different worlds within the same household. When I was 7 and Marcus was 4, I remember bringing home a report card with all A's except for one B+ in math. My father barely glanced at it before saying I needed to work harder if I wanted to amount to anything. That same week, Marcus scribbled his name on a piece of construction paper at preschool, and my parents acted like he had created the Mona Lisa. They hung it on the refrigerator with 3 different magnets and called both sets of grandparents to share the news. The disparity wasn't subtle. Marcus got the larger bedroom with the bay window overlooking our backyard garden, while I was given the smaller room facing the neighbor's fence. When it came time for extracurricular activities, Marcus was enrolled in private tennis lessons, sailing camp, and piano instruction with the best teachers money could buy. I was allowed to join the school band, but only because it was free and wouldn't interfere with my household responsibilities. By age 10, I was expected to help with dinner preparation, laundry folding, and general tidying up. Marcus was told his job was to focus on his studies and sports. Christmas mornings were particularly painful. Each December, I would wake up with the same hopeful anticipation that maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year, my parents would show me the same love and generosity they showered on Marcus. Instead, the gift disparity became more pronounced with each passing year. When I was 12 and Marcus was 9, he received a top-of-the-line mountain bike while I got a used desk from a garage sale that my mother had hastily wrapped in leftover paper. When I was 16 and Marcus was 13, he unwrapped the latest iPhone while I received a package of practical items, socks, underwear, and a new alarm clock, because mine had broken months earlier. My parents had their explanations ready whenever anyone questioned the obvious favoritism. Marcus was younger and needed more encouragement. Marcus had special talents that required investment. Marcus would carry on the family legacy. I was older and more responsible, which meant I didn't need material things to feel valued. I was supposed to find satisfaction in being helpful and self-sufficient. These explanations felt hollow even then, but I learned to accept them, because questioning only led to lectures about gratitude and perspective. School became my sanctuary, the one place where my worth wasn't predetermined by my position in the family hierarchy. Teachers praised my writing abilities and critical thinking skills. I excelled in literature and history, finding solace in stories of characters who overcame difficult circumstances. My English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed my potential early on and encouraged me to enter writing competitions. When I won second place in a statewide essay contest during my junior year, I rushed home to share the news, clutching my certificate and ribbon. My parents were in the kitchen discussing Marcus's upcoming lacrosse tournament when I burst through the door. I barely got the words out before my father interrupted me. "That's nice, Rebecca, but Marcus needs to leave for practice in 20 minutes, and someone forgot to wash his uniform." My mother pointed to the laundry room without looking up from her schedule. The certificate went into a drawer in my desk, never to be displayed or mentioned again. Meanwhile, Marcus's participation ribbons from various sports camps decorated the mantelpiece in the living room like family heirlooms. High school graduation approached with the usual family drama. I had been accepted to several excellent universities, including Brown and Middlebury, with partial scholarships based on my academic achievements. When I shared the acceptance letters with my parents, their response was lukewarm at best. "College is expensive," my father said, reviewing the financial aid packages. "We need to be practical about this investment. Marcus will be applying to universities soon, and his athletic abilities might earn him opportunities at more prestigious institutions." The message was clear. My education was an expense, while Marcus's future prospects were an investment worthy of their resources. I ended up attending the state university, which offered me a full scholarship, while my parents openly discussed their plans to pay full tuition for Marcus at whatever Ivy League school would accept him. The irony wasn't lost on me that my academic success was saving them money they could then spend on my brother's less impressive but more valued potential. College provided my first real taste of independence, though I worked multiple part-time jobs to cover my living expenses while my classmates enjoyed typical campus social activities. I studied journalism and communications, drawn to the idea of telling stories that might help people feel less alone in their struggles. During summer breaks, I returned home to work at a local newspaper as an unpaid intern, building clips and experience while Marcus spent his summers at expensive sports camps and beach house rentals with friends. The contrast in how my parents spoke about our respective futures became more pronounced as we both entered our 20s. Marcus struggled academically at his private university, changing majors 3 times and barely maintaining the minimum GPA required to stay enrolled. My parents hired expensive tutors and academic coaches to help him succeed. Meanwhile, I graduated magna cum laude and secured an entry-level position at a respected digital marketing firm in Hartford. When I shared news of my job offer, my mother's first question was whether the salary would be enough for me to start paying them back for some of my college expenses. Marcus graduated 2 years later with a degree in communications and no clear career direction. My parents immediately began networking on his behalf, using my father's medical connections and my mother's business relationships to secure interviews for positions Marcus wasn't remotely qualified for. He eventually landed a job at a marketing agency, coincidentally the same field I had been working in for several years by then. The difference was that his starting salary was significantly higher than what I had been earning after multiple promotions, and he received it purely through family connections rather than merit. Despite everything, I maintained hope that my parents might eventually recognize my accomplishments and treat me with the same pride they showed for Marcus. I worked exceptionally hard, earning rapid promotions and recognition within my industry. I purchased my own small condominium, furnished it myself, and built a life I was genuinely proud of. When I invited my parents to see my new place,
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Spent the entire visit commenting on things that needed improvement, rather than acknowledging what I had achieved independently. "The condo is nice," my mother said, running her finger along a windowsill, "but you might want to invest in better cleaning supplies. This dust wouldn't accumulate if you maintained things properly." My father spent most of the visit pointing out what he considered poor design choices and questioning whether I had overpaid for the property. They left after an hour, and I realized they hadn't said a single positive thing about my home or my accomplishments. That same week, Marcus mentioned in passing that he was considering buying a luxury car, and my parents immediately offered to co-sign the loan and help with the down payment. Professional success continued to elude me in terms of family recognition, even as my career flourished. I was promoted to senior account manager and began leading high-profile campaigns for major clients. My work earned industry awards and was featured in marketing publications. When I shared these achievements during family dinners, the conversation would inevitably shift to Marcus within minutes. He had joined a recreational tennis league. He was thinking about getting his MBA someday. He had started dating someone new. Every topic somehow became about him, while my actual professional accomplishments were treated as background noise. The romantic relationship aspect of my life became another source of family commentary and comparison. I had been dating David, a fellow marketing professional, for nearly 2 years. He was kind, intelligent, and supportive of my career ambitions. He treated me with respect and encouraged my goals in ways my family never had. When I brought David to Sunday dinners, my parents were polite but distant. They asked perfunctory questions about his job and background, but never made effort to include him in meaningful conversations. Marcus, meanwhile, had a series of short-term relationships with women my parents invariably adored, regardless of how poorly he treated them or how quickly the relationships ended. They would invite his girlfriends to family events, remember their birthdays, and express disappointment when the relationships inevitably failed. When Marcus dated Jessica, a retail manager he met at a bar, my parents treated her like a potential daughter-in-law despite the fact that he openly complained about her in front of the family. When that relationship ended after 3 months, my mother actually called Jessica to maintain the friendship independently. David and I became engaged after 3 years together, a milestone I was excited to share with my family. We had chosen a modest ring that fit our budget and planned a small ceremony that reflected our values rather than trying to impress others. When I showed my mother the engagement ring, her first comment was about the size of the stone. "It's lovely, dear, but don't you think something a bit more substantial would be more appropriate for someone in your position?" She meant my age and career level, implying that I should have either found someone wealthier or achieved more myself to warrant a larger diamond. The wedding planning process revealed new levels of family dysfunction I hadn't fully appreciated before. My parents offered to contribute a modest amount toward the ceremony while simultaneously planning an elaborate surprise party for Marcus's 25th birthday that cost more than their entire wedding contribution. The party featured a live band, professional catering, and decorations that transformed their backyard into something resembling a luxury resort. Marcus's friends were flown in from various cities, and the celebration lasted 2 full days. My wedding reception, by comparison, was held in a community center with a DJ and buffet-style dinner that David and I largely paid for ourselves. What hurt most wasn't the money, though the disparity was obvious and painful. What devastated me was the enthusiasm my parents showed for Marcus's birthday celebration compared to their dutiful but unenthusiastic participation in my wedding planning. They spent months coordinating details for his party, calling vendors, sampling menus, and ensuring every element would be perfect. For my wedding, they asked occasional questions about logistics and offered opinions only when directly asked. The message was unmistakable. Marcus's happiness was worth investing in, while mine was something to be managed efficiently. David noticed the family dynamics immediately and tried to be supportive without overstepping boundaries. After particularly difficult family gatherings, he would gently point out behaviors I had normalized over decades of conditioning. "Your brother didn't acknowledge your promotion at all tonight," he observed after one Sunday dinner. "And when you tried to share news about the client meeting, your dad literally started talking about Marcus's golf game mid-sentence." Having someone witness and validate these interactions was both comforting and heartbreaking. It confirmed that I wasn't imagining the treatment, but it also highlighted how abnormal my family relationships truly were. The final Christmas that changed everything started like all the others, with my mother coordinating elaborate preparations while assigning me various tasks to help ensure the day went smoothly. I was expected to arrive early to assist with meal preparation, table setting, and general hosting duties. Marcus was told to simply show up on time and enjoy himself. The pattern was so established that I didn't question it anymore. I brought homemade cookies, helped arrange flowers, and spent the morning peeling vegetables while Marcus slept in at his apartment across town. Extended family members would be joining us, including my Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert with their 2 children, plus my maternal grandparents who had driven down from Vermont. I always looked forward to seeing my grandparents, who treated Marcus and me more equally and seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. My grandmother, in particular, had always been interested in my work and remembered details about my projects and goals. She was one of the few family members who celebrated my achievements without immediately redirecting attention to Marcus. The gift exchange happened after dinner, following our family tradition of gathering in the living room while Christmas music played softly in the background. Marcus went first, as he always did, unwrapping present after present with increasing excitement. The Rolex was his final gift, presented in an elegant wooden box that my father had clearly spent considerable time selecting. The watch itself was stunning, with its deep blue dial and stainless steel bracelet catching the light from our Christmas tree. Marcus's face lit up with genuine joy as he realized what he was holding, and my parents beamed with satisfaction at his reaction. Then it was my turn. I had learned to manage my expectations over the years, but some small part of me still hoped each Christmas might be different. The box was significantly smaller than Marcus's collection of gifts, and lighter too. When I opened it and saw the cleaning supplies, I initially thought it might be a joke, or perhaps there was something else underneath. But no, it was exactly what it appeared to be: rubber gloves, toilet bowl cleaner, scrub brushes, and a bottle of glass cleaner. The kind of practical items someone might pick up at a grocery store without much thought. The silence in the room was deafening. My grandparents looked confused and slightly horrified. My Aunt Linda's expression showed obvious discomfort, while my Uncle Robert stared at his hands. My cousins, both teenagers, exchanged glances that suggested they understood exactly how inappropriate this gift exchange had been. Even Marcus seemed uncomfortable, though he said nothing. My parents, however, appeared pleased with their choice, as if they had solved some practical problem in my life. "Your apartment always looks like it could use better maintenance," my mother said cheerfully, as if she had given me exactly what I needed. "And since you're so independent, we thought you might appreciate having the right tools for the job." My father nodded in agreement, adding that self-sufficiency was an important life skill that would serve me well. The implication was clear. While Marcus deserved luxury and celebration, I deserved reminders of my domestic obligations. I managed to maintain my composure through the remainder of the evening, but internally, something fundamental shifted. This wasn't about money or material possessions. This was about respect, love, and basic human dignity. The cleaning supplies represented everything wrong with how my family viewed me, not as a successful professional or accomplished individual, but as someone whose highest purpose was maintaining cleanliness and serving others. The contrast with Marcus's expensive, thoughtful gift made the message impossible to ignore or rationalize away. That night, I lay awake thinking about the entirety of my relationship with my parents. Every memory took on new significance when viewed through the lens of this latest humiliation. The pattern had been there all along, but I had spent so many years hoping things would change that I hadn't fully accepted the reality of my situation. My parents didn't see me as an equal member of the family worthy of respect and investment. They saw me as a supporting character in Marcus's story, someone whose role was to be helpful and undemanding while he received the starring treatment. David held me as I cried that night, not just for the gift itself, but for everything it represented. Years of diminished expectations, dismissed achievements, and secondary status within my own family. The cleaning supplies were simply the most blatant symbol of a dynamic that had shaped my entire life. But something else was building alongside the grief. Anger. Not the destructive kind that consumes and embitters, but the clarifying kind that reveals truth and demands action. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt by my family's treatment. I was genuinely angry about it, and that anger was beginning to feel like power. The weeks following Christmas were transformative in ways I hadn't anticipated. The anger that had crystallized on Christmas night didn't fade, as I expected it might. Instead, it evolved into something more purposeful and strategic. I found myself analyzing every interaction with my family through a new lens, recognizing patterns I had previously accepted as normal. David noticed the change immediately, commenting that I seemed more assertive and less willing to accommodate unreasonable requests from my parents. The first test of this new mindset came when my mother called 3 days after New Year's, asking if I could help organize a dinner party she was hosting for my father's medical colleagues. In the past, I would have automatically agreed, spending my weekend shopping, cooking, and serving while receiving no acknowledgement for my efforts. This time, I politely declined, explaining that I had other commitments. The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. My mother had clearly expected my usual compliance and didn't know how to respond to this unexpected boundary. "But Rebecca," she finally said, "you know how important these networking events are for your father's career. Surely whatever you have planned can be rescheduled." I remained firm, reiterating that I wouldn't be able to help this time. She could hire catering staff or ask Marcus to assist if additional help was needed. The suggestion that Marcus might contribute to household tasks was apparently so foreign that my mother actually laughed. "You know your brother isn't good at that sort of thing," she said dismissively. "This is more in your wheelhouse anyway." The phrase, "more in your wheelhouse," echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. My wheelhouse, according to my family, consisted of domestic tasks, emotional labor, and supporting roles that made everyone else's life easier. Their wheelhouse included career advancement, personal fulfillment, and receiving support from others. The arbitrary nature of these assignments became glaringly obvious once I started questioning them. There was nothing inherently female or natural about my supposed affinity for cleaning and organizing. These were simply roles my family had assigned based on their convenience rather than my preferences or talents. Work became an even greater source of satisfaction as I began applying this new clarity to my professional life. I had always been competent and hardworking, but I realized I had also been unnecessarily deferential and hesitant to advocate for myself. The same conditioning that made me accept secondary status at home had influenced how I approached advancement opportunities at the office. I started speaking up more in meetings, volunteering for high-visibility projects, and networking more strategically within the industry. My supervisor, Jennifer, noticed the change during our quarterly review in February. "You've been much more assertive lately," she observed, "and it's paying off. The Morrison campaign exceeded all expectations, and your presentation to the executive team was outstanding. I'm thinking about recommending you for the creative director position that's opening up in the fall." The possibility of such a significant promotion would have terrified me 6 months earlier. Now it felt like natural recognition of capabilities I had always possessed but had been trained to minimize. Meanwhile, my family's reaction to my newfound boundaries became increasingly dramatic. When I missed Sunday dinner to attend a professional conference, my mother left multiple voicemails expressing disappointment and concern. "Your father specifically mentioned wanting to discuss something with you," she said in the final message. "It's not like you to prioritize work over family obligations." The irony was staggering. Marcus routinely skipped family events for social activities, sports commitments, or simple preference, and these absences were accepted as evidence of his busy, important life. My single absence for career development was treated as a betrayal of family values. The conference itself was revelatory in ways that extended beyond professional networking. During a panel discussion about workplace dynamics, one speaker addressed imposter syndrome and self-advocacy. She described how many high-achieving women struggle to recognize their own competence because they've been conditioned to seek external validation rather than trusting their internal assessment of their abilities. The description resonated so deeply that I found myself taking extensive notes, not just about workplace applications but about family relationships as well. After the session, I approached the speaker, Dr. Sarah Chen, an organizational psychologist who specialized in leadership development. Our conversation continued over coffee, where I found myself sharing more about my background than I had intended. Dr. Chen listened thoughtfully before offering observations that reframed my entire understanding of family dynamics. "What you're describing sounds like a classic case of scapegoating and golden child syndrome," she said gently. "These patterns often persist into adulthood unless they're consciously interrupted." She recommended several books about family systems and emotional abuse, resources I devoured over the following weeks. The terminology was initially jarring because it forced me to confront the reality that my family's treatment constituted a form of psychological abuse. I had always reserved that word for more dramatic situations, but the literature made clear that emotional neglect and systematic devaluation could be just as damaging as more obvious forms of mistreatment. The validation was both liberating and heartbreaking. David and I began having deeper conversations about the future of our relationship with my family. He had always been diplomatic about their behavior, supporting me while avoiding direct criticism that might put me in an uncomfortable position. Now, with my own perspective shifting, he felt more comfortable sharing his honest observations. "Your family treats you like hired help," he said one evening, after a particularly frustrating phone call from my mother. "They expect you to be available for their convenience, while showing no interest in your actual life or achievements." His assessment was accurate but difficult to accept fully. Acknowledging the extent of my family's dysfunction meant grieving for the relationship I had always hoped might develop. Some part of me had continued believing that if I just found the right approach, achieved enough success, or demonstrated sufficient value, my parents would eventually see me as worthy of their pride and affection. Accepting that this transformation might never occur required letting go of a fundamental hope that had sustained me through decades of disappointment. The spring brought several events that tested my evolving boundaries and highlighted the growing tension within family relationships. Marcus announced his engagement to Stephanie, a woman he had been dating for 8 months. The news prompted immediate celebration and elaborate planning from my parents, who began discussing venue options, guest lists, and budget considerations with enthusiasm I had never witnessed during my own wedding preparations. The contrast was so stark that even David commented on it without prompting. Stephanie was pleasant enough, though she shared Marcus's lack of ambition and tendency to expect things to be provided rather than earned. She worked part-time at a boutique clothing store and lived in an apartment subsidized by her parents, showing no particular interest in developing career skills or financial independence. My parents adored her immediately, praising her sweet nature and traditional values. The qualities that made Stephanie appealing to them were precisely those I had been criticized for lacking: compliance, dependence, and willingness to prioritize relationships over personal achievement. The engagement dinner was held at an expensive restaurant downtown, with my parents insisting on covering the entire cost for extended family and friends. When they announced their intention to host the event, I volunteered to help with planning and coordination, an offer that was politely declined. "Your father and I want to handle this ourselves," my mother explained. "It's important that everything reflects the significance of the occasion." The implication that my involvement might somehow diminish the event's importance was clear, even if it wasn't explicitly stated. During the dinner itself, my father delivered a toast praising Marcus's choice of partner and expressing confidence in their future happiness. He spoke about the importance of finding someone who would support Marcus's ambitions and create a stable foundation for his success. The toast included no mention of the bride's individual qualities or achievements, focusing entirely on her role in facilitating Marcus's continued development. When my father asked if anyone else wanted to speak, I briefly considered offering congratulations but decided against it. My words would be perfunctory at best, and the evening wasn't really about celebrating love or partnership. It was about celebrating Marcus's latest acquisition. The conversation throughout dinner revealed telling assumptions about gender roles and family expectations. Stephanie was asked about wedding dress preferences and catering ideas, while Marcus was questioned about career advancement and investment strategies. My own marriage to David was briefly referenced as an example of successful partnership, though the compliments focused on how well I had adapted to married life, rather than any qualities I brought to the relationship independently. No one asked about my recent promotion or the industry recognition I had received for the Morrison campaign. As summer approached, my parents began planning an elaborate engagement party to introduce Stephanie to their broader social circle. The event was designed to showcase their family's status and success, with professional catering, live music, and decorations that would transform their backyard into an elegant venue. My mother spent weeks coordinating details and making arrangements, displaying organizational skills and attention to detail that rivaled any professional event planner. I wasn't consulted about the planning process, but I was expected to attend and help with hosting duties during the party itself. The assumption that I would be available to serve drinks, assist with food service, and manage logistics was never explicitly discussed. It was simply understood that these responsibilities would fall to me, as they always had during family gatherings. This time, however, I had other plans. David and I had booked a weekend getaway to a bed and breakfast in the Berkshires, a trip we had planned months in advance to celebrate our own anniversary. When I mentioned that we wouldn't be able to attend the engagement party, my mother's reaction was immediate and intense. She called multiple times over the next few days, alternating between guilt-inducing appeals and barely concealed anger. "How can you miss your brother's engagement party?" she demanded during one particularly heated conversation. "This is one of the most important events in our family's history." The phrase family history was particularly galling, considering that my own engagement and wedding had warranted minimal celebration and investment. But I maintained my position, explaining that we had made these plans long before the party date was announced and couldn't cancel our reservations. The suggestion that perhaps the party date could be adjusted to accommodate family members' schedules was met with incredulous silence. Clearly, the idea that Marcus and Stephanie's preferences might be secondary to anyone else's needs was unthinkable. Marcus himself eventually called to express disappointment about my absence, though his tone suggested the conversation had been prompted by our parents rather than genuine personal concern. "Stephanie really wanted you to be there," he said, though I suspected Stephanie was largely indifferent to my attendance. "She's nervous about meeting all the family friends, and you're good at making people feel comfortable." The compliment felt backhanded, reducing my social skills to their utility for others, rather than recognizing them as valuable qualities in their own right. The weekend in the Berkshires was exactly what David and I needed. We hiked through mountain trails, enjoyed wine tastings at local vineyards, and spent hours talking about our future plans without the constant undercurrent of family drama that had begun to dominate our conversations. The absence of obligation and criticism allowed me to reconnect with aspects of myself that had been overshadowed by the effort to manage family relationships. I remembered what it felt like to be valued for my own qualities rather than judged for my failure to meet arbitrary expectations. When we returned home Sunday evening, there were 14 missed calls from my mother and several text messages expressing varying degrees of concern and annoyance. The engagement party had apparently proceeded without incident, but my absence had been noted and discussed by multiple family members. According to the messages, several people had specifically asked where I was, forcing my parents to explain my decision to prioritize a personal trip over family obligations. The following week brought a series of conversations designed to express family disappointment and encourage me to be more considerate in the future. My Aunt Linda called to share her surprise at my absence, noting that family events should take precedence over personal plans. My grandmother, with whom I had always felt closer, gently questioned whether something was troubling me that might explain my recent behavior. Even Marcus made several attempts to discuss what he perceived as my increasing distance from family activities. These conversations revealed how thoroughly my compliance had been taken for granted over the years. No one seemed to consider that I might have legitimate reasons for wanting to establish boundaries or prioritize my own needs occasionally. The assumption was that something must be wrong with me to explain this deviation from expected behavior. The possibility that I might be responding rationally to problematic family dynamics was never entertained. My professional life continued to flourish as I applied the same boundary-setting skills to workplace relationships. The creative director position became official in September, bringing with it a substantial salary increase and significantly expanded responsibilities. The promotion required relocating to our company's Boston office, an opportunity that excited me both professionally and personally. The distance from family would create natural boundaries while allowing me to advance my career in a larger market. When I shared news of the promotion and relocation with my parents, their response was notably lukewarm. Instead of congratulating me on the achievement, they immediately focused on the practical complications this change would create for family gatherings and obligations. "How will you manage to attend Sunday dinners?" my mother asked, as if this were the primary consideration rather than my career advancement. "And what about the holidays? Surely you don't expect us to adjust our traditions to accommodate your new schedule." The conversation continued in this vein for nearly an hour, with my parents expressing concern about how my career priorities were affecting my family relationships. There was no acknowledgement of the hard work and talent that had earned me this opportunity, no pride in my professional growth, and no interest in understanding what this promotion meant for my personal development. Their focus remained entirely on how my success might inconvenience them or disrupt established patterns. Marcus's reaction was even more telling. When I called to share the news, his first question was whether my new salary would allow me to contribute more to family expenses and events. He had apparently been discussing with our parents the possibility of having a destination wedding, and they were exploring ways to manage the increased costs. The assumption that my financial success should automatically benefit family projects, particularly those centered around Marcus, was so deeply ingrained that he didn't seem to recognize how inappropriate the suggestion was. The move to Boston occurred in October, coinciding with the beginning of wedding planning for Marcus and Stephanie's spring ceremony. From my new apartment in Back Bay, I watched from a distance as my family threw themselves into elaborate preparations that rivaled professional event coordination. My mother called regularly with updates about vendor meetings, menu tastings, and decorative themes, though these conversations felt more like reports than invitations for input. My role in the wedding planning process was carefully circumscribed. I was expected to participate in specific activities, primarily those involving physical labor or financial contribution, while being excluded from major decision-making discussions. When Stephanie scheduled dress shopping appointments, I was invited to carry bags and offer opinions on selections that had already been narrowed down by my mother and future sister-in-law. When venue visits were arranged, I was asked to take notes and handle logistics while others focused on aesthetic and budgetary decisions. The assumption that I would serve as an unpaid wedding coordinator became more explicit as planning progressed. My mother began forwarding me vendor contact information and expecting me to handle follow-up communications, schedule confirmations, and detail management. The expectation was never directly stated, but phone calls consistently ended with implied assignments and responsibilities that I was supposed to understand and accept without discussion. This time, however, I declined to automatically assume these duties. When asked to coordinate transportation for out-of-town relatives, I suggested hiring a professional service or asking Marcus to handle the arrangements himself. When expected to manage vendor communications, I recommended that decisions of this magnitude should be handled by the people paying for the services. My responses were polite but firm, establishing boundaries that had never existed in previous family events. The reaction to these boundaries was swift and dramatic. My mother scheduled a lunch meeting in Boston under the pretense of wanting to see my new apartment and catch up on my life. The actual purpose became clear within minutes of her arrival, as she launched into a carefully prepared speech about family obligations and the importance of supporting Marcus during this important time in his life. She began by acknowledging my career success and expressing pride in my accomplishments, though the compliments felt strategic rather than genuine. "Your father and I are very proud of what you've achieved professionally," she said, though I noticed she avoided specifics about what those achievements actually were. "But we're concerned that your focus on work might be affecting your ability to maintain family relationships that should be equally important." The conversation continued with increasingly direct appeals to guilt and obligation. "Marcus has always looked up to you," she claimed, despite decades of evidence suggesting he viewed me as irrelevant at best. "He needs to know that his family supports him during this transition to married life. And poor Stephanie is overwhelmed by all the planning details. She could really use someone with your organizational skills to help make sure everything goes smoothly." When gentle manipulation failed to achieve the desired compliance, my mother's approach became more confrontational. "I don't understand this selfish phase you're going through," she said, her voice taking on the sharp edge I remembered from childhood disagreements. "You used to be so reliable and helpful. Now you seem to care more about your own convenience than your family's needs." The accusation of selfishness was particularly ironic, considering my family's decades-long expectation that I subordinate my needs to everyone else's preferences. I responded calmly but directly, explaining that establishing healthy boundaries didn't constitute selfishness or lack of caring. "I love Marcus and want his wedding to be wonderful," I said, "but that doesn't mean I need to serve as unpaid event staff to demonstrate my support. Professional coordinators exist for exactly these purposes, and hiring appropriate help would ensure better results than relying on family members to donate their time and expertise." The suggestion that they hire professional help rather than relying on my free labor was apparently so shocking that my mother fell silent for several moments. When she finally responded, her tone had shifted to barely concealed anger. "We're not asking you to plan the entire wedding, Rebecca. We're simply expecting normal family participation. Most daughters would be honored to help with their brother's special day." The phrase "normal family participation" lingered in my mind long after my mother left that afternoon. What constituted normal in family relationships? Was it normal for parents to expect one child to serve as unpaid staff while celebrating another child's milestones? Was it normal for family members to contribute labor and resources without reciprocal consideration or appreciation? Or was this simply another example of arbitrary expectations designed to maintain established power dynamics? That evening, I called Dr. Chen, whose insights had been valuable during our previous conversations. She listened as I described the wedding situation and my family's reaction to my newly established boundaries. Her analysis was both validating and sobering. What you're experiencing is typical when someone begins changing their role in a dysfunctional family system, she explained. The family often responds by increasing pressure to return to previous patterns because your compliance serves their emotional and practical needs. She recommended that I continue maintaining boundaries while preparing for escalating attempts to restore the status quo. Family systems resist change, she warned, and they often interpret boundary setting as attacks on the family structure itself. Your parents have organized their relationship around the assumption that you will provide support services while Marcus receives celebration and investment. Disrupting that pattern threatens their entire worldview. The conversation helped me understand that my family's reaction wasn't really about wedding planning or family loyalty. It was about power and control, specifically their fear of losing the reliable compliance that had characterized my role for decades. My newfound willingness to prioritize my own needs and decline unreasonable requests challenged assumptions that had governed family relationships since childhood. November brought additional pressure as wedding preparations intensified, and my continued resistance to serving as unpaid coordinator became more problematic for my family's plans. Marcus called multiple times to discuss specific tasks that needed completion, always framing requests as favors rather than obligations. "Could you handle the hotel room blocks?" he would ask. "You're so much better at coordinating these things than I am." Or, "Would you mind confirming the catering details? The vendor seems to respond better to you." These requests seemed reasonable on the surface, but they collectively added up to significant time and effort that I was expected to donate without acknowledgement or compensation. More importantly, they maintained the pattern of me serving Marcus's needs while receiving no reciprocal support for my own life events or goals. When I pointed out that wedding coordination was typically handled by paid professionals or the people directly benefiting from the services, Marcus responded with hurt confusion rather than understanding. The most revealing conversation occurred when Marcus asked why I was being so difficult about helping with wedding preparations. "We've always been able to count on you," he said, his tone suggesting genuine bewilderment at my changed behavior. "I don't understand why you're making everything so complicated now." The phrase, "count on you," encapsulated everything problematic about our family dynamics. They had indeed counted on me to prioritize their needs over my own, to provide services without reciprocation, and to accept secondary status without complaint. December arrived with increasing family tension and my continued commitment to maintaining healthy boundaries, despite mounting pressure to resume my traditional role as family helper and supporter. The Christmas season, which had historically been a time of maximum obligation and minimum recognition, now represented an opportunity to establish new patterns that reflected my actual value, rather than my assigned function. The announcement came during a family conference call in early December, ostensibly organized to discuss holiday plans, but actually designed to coordinate renewed pressure for my compliance with wedding responsibilities. My parents, Marcus and Stephanie, all participated, creating what felt more like an intervention than a casual conversation about Christmas dinner logistics. The call began with surface-level planning discussions about menu preferences and scheduling, but quickly devolved into pointed comments about my recent unavailability and lack of helpfulness regarding wedding preparations. My father, who rarely involved himself directly in emotional manipulation, made several remarks about the importance of family loyalty and supporting each other during significant life events. When the conversation reached its intended climax, my mother delivered what was clearly a prepared statement about my changed behavior and its impact on family relationships. "Rebecca, we need to address the elephant in the room," she announced. "Your attitude lately has been selfish and hurtful, and it's affecting everyone. Marcus and Stephanie are planning the most important day of their lives, and instead of supporting them, you're creating additional stress with your unreasonable demands and constant refusal to help." The accusation that I was creating stress through unreasonable demands was particularly galling, since my only demand had been that reasonable boundaries be respected. I had never asked my family to provide me with services or support. I had simply declined to continue providing unlimited free labor for their benefit. The characterization of this boundary setting as selfishness revealed how thoroughly they had internalized the expectation of my compliance. Stephanie joined the conversation to express her disappointment and confusion about my behavior. "Marcus told me you used to be so helpful and involved," she said, her voice suggesting wounded innocence. I was really looking forward to having a sister who would help me navigate all these wedding decisions. Now I feel like I'm imposing whenever I ask for advice or assistance. The irony was stunning. Stephanie had never asked for advice or assistance. She had made decisions in consultation with my parents and Marcus, then expected me to handle implementation and logistics. Her version of sisterly support involved me providing services, while she received guidance and attention from other family members. The complaint that she felt like she was imposing suggested either complete lack of self-awareness or deliberate manipulation. Marcus's contribution to the conversation was perhaps the most revealing of all. He expressed genuine hurt and confusion about my changed behavior, describing memories of previous family events where I had apparently been happy to help with various tasks and responsibilities. "You used to enjoy being involved," he said. "I don't understand what changed or why you don't want to be part of these important moments anymore." His perception that I had previously enjoyed serving as family event staff was so disconnected from reality that I initially wondered if we were remembering the same events. Then I realized that from his perspective my compliance had indeed appeared voluntary and enthusiastic. He had never been expected to notice my actual feelings or consider whether I might prefer to participate as a guest rather than unpaid staff. My cheerful efficiency had been interpreted as genuine satisfaction rather than conditioned behavior designed to avoid family disapproval. The call concluded with an ultimatum disguised as a heartfelt appeal. My mother explained that they had decided to give me an opportunity to reconsider my recent behavior and return to being the family member they knew and loved. Christmas would be a fresh start, she announced, where I could demonstrate my commitment to family relationships by enthusiastically participating in holiday preparations and wedding planning discussions. The implication was clear. My acceptance back into family good graces was conditional on resuming my traditional role as helper and supporter. If I continued to maintain boundaries and prioritize my own needs, I would be treated as a selfish outsider who had chosen career success over family loyalty. The choice, as they presented it, was between being loved and being respected. That night, I lay awake thinking about the ultimatum and what it revealed about my family's fundamental inability to see me as a complete person worthy of unconditional love. Their affection had always been contingent on my usefulness, my compliance, and my willingness to prioritize their needs over my own. Now that I was no longer willing to accept secondary status, they were prepared to withdraw that conditional love entirely. The realization was both heartbreaking and liberating. For the first time, I understood that no amount of achievement, service, or accommodation would ever earn me the respect and appreciation I craved from my family. They were fundamentally incapable of seeing me as anything other than a supporting character in Marcus's story. Accepting this truth meant grieving for the relationship I had always hoped might develop, but it also freed me from the futile effort to earn love that was never truly available. David found me in the kitchen the next morning, staring at my coffee and clearly processing the previous evening's conversation. Without prompting, I shared the entire exchange and my growing understanding of its implications. He listened thoughtfully before offering the perspective that I was beginning to reach independently. "Your family is never going to change," he said gently. "The question is whether you're ready to stop hoping they will and start protecting yourself from their dysfunction." His words crystallized something that had been building for months. I was ready to stop hoping for transformation that would never come. I was ready to protect myself from relationships that diminished rather than nourished me. And I was ready to create the life I wanted without waiting for permission or approval from people who had never valued my happiness anyway. The decision felt simultaneously terrifying and inevitable. Christmas was approaching, along with the final test of whether I would resume my traditional role or continue establishing the boundaries that protected my dignity and self-respect. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly what I was going to choose, regardless of the consequences. Christmas morning arrived with an unusual sense of calm. David and I had decided to host our own quiet celebration in our Boston apartment, complete with homemade breakfast and a carefully curated playlist of jazz standards. The absence of family obligations felt foreign but refreshing, like taking off shoes that had been too tight for years without realizing the discomfort. My phone buzzed intermittently with messages from various family members, each expressing disappointment about my absence from the traditional Christmas gathering. The messages followed predictable patterns: guilt about missing precious family time, concern about my well-being, and barely veiled criticism of my priorities. I read them without the familiar surge of anxiety that had accompanied family disapproval for decades. Around noon, Marcus called directly, his voice carrying a mixture of hurt and confusion that I had come to recognize as his standard response when family dynamics didn't unfold according to his expectations. "Rebecca, this is ridiculous," he began without preamble. "Everyone's here asking where you are, and I don't know what to tell them. Mom made your favorite sweet potato casserole, and Dad actually asked about your job promotion. They're trying to include you, but you're not giving them a chance." The conversation revealed how completely Marcus misunderstood the fundamental issues in our family relationships. In his mind, the problem was my absence, rather than the decades of differential treatment that had led to my decision. He genuinely believed that his parents had been trying to include me, apparently unaware that inclusion on their terms required my acceptance of secondary status and service expectations. I explained calmly that I needed space from family dynamics that had become unhealthy for me, but Marcus interrupted with increasing agitation. "What family dynamics?" he demanded. "We're not perfect, but every family has issues. You're acting like we're some kind of abusive household, which is completely unfair to Mom and Dad. They've always done their best for both of us." His use of the word abusive was telling, suggesting that family members had been discussing my behavior in those terms, and dismissing the possibility that their treatment might warrant such characterization. The defensive reaction indicated that my boundary setting had indeed threatened their fundamental assumptions about family relationships and their own behavior. The conversation concluded with Marcus expressing hope that I would reconsider my position and join the family for dinner, emphasizing that my absence was casting a shadow over what should be a joyful celebration. His inability to understand that my presence had never been about joy or celebration, but rather obligation and service, encapsulated everything problematic about our family dynamics. That evening, David and I enjoyed a peaceful dinner, while my phone remained mercifully quiet. The silence felt like victory rather than isolation. For the first time in my adult life, Christmas had been about relaxation and connection rather than performance and duty. The contrast illuminated how much energy I had been expending on managing family relationships that provided little genuine satisfaction or fulfillment. The new year brought accelerated wedding planning and increasingly desperate attempts from my family to re-engage my participation in arrangements that were becoming more elaborate by the week. My mother called regularly with updates that felt more like assignments, describing vendor meetings and planning sessions that somehow always required follow-up tasks that fell to me by default. The breaking point came in February, when my mother announced that she had scheduled a family weekend at a resort in the White Mountains to finalize wedding details and enjoy quality time together before the spring ceremony. The weekend was presented as a generous gift and bonding opportunity, though the agenda she forwarded made clear that I would be expected to handle logistics, coordinate activities, and manage various practical arrangements, while others focused on decision-making and relaxation. When I declined to attend, citing work commitments and prior obligations, the response was swift and more intense than any previous family reaction. My mother called within hours, her voice tight with controlled anger that barely masked deeper fury. "This has gone far enough, Rebecca," she said, dispensing with her usual preliminary pleasantries. "Your behavior over the past year has been selfish and hurtful, and we're not going to tolerate it anymore." The conversation that followed was unlike any previous family confrontation in its directness and intensity. My mother abandoned her typical passive-aggressive approach in favor of explicit criticism and demands. She accused me of jealousy regarding Marcus's engagement, resentment about my childhood treatment, and deliberate attempts to sabotage family relationships out of spite and immaturity. "You've always been jealous of your brother," she stated with surprising venom. "Even as children, you couldn't stand seeing him succeed or receive attention. Now you're using his wedding as an opportunity to punish the entire family for imaginary grievances." The characterization of my childhood experiences as imaginary grievances was particularly stunning, suggesting either complete lack of awareness or deliberate denial of decades of differential treatment. When I attempted to explain my perspective calmly, My mother interrupted with increasing aggression. "I don't want to hear your excuses or your therapist's theories about our family," she snapped, revealing that they had been discussing my boundary setting in therapeutic terms and dismissing professional insights as external manipulation. "We know who we are and how we've raised our children. If you can't appreciate what we've done for you, that's your problem, not ours." The conversation escalated when I suggested that perhaps family relationships should involve mutual respect and consideration, rather than unilateral service expectations. My mother's response was immediate and devastating in its clarity. "If you're not willing to be part of this family on our terms, then maybe you shouldn't be part of it at all," she said, her voice cold with finality. "We've bent over backward trying to accommodate your new attitude, but we're done enabling your selfishness." The ultimatum was delivered with the same matter-of-fact tone my mother might use to discuss dinner plans or weather forecasts. Either I would resume my traditional role as family helper and supporter, attending the resort weekend and enthusiastically participating in wedding preparations, or I would be considered to have chosen separation from family relationships entirely. There would be no middle ground, no compromise, and no acknowledgement that my needs might be legitimate. After she hung up, I sat in my apartment, processing the conversation and its implications. The family I had spent decades trying to please and appease was prepared to discard me entirely, rather than examine their own behavior or consider modifications to relationship dynamics that had never served my well-being. Their love, such as it was, had always been conditional on my compliance and usefulness. The realization brought grief, but also tremendous relief. I was finally free from the exhausting effort to earn acceptance that was never truly available. No more hoping that this time would be different, that this achievement would finally warrant recognition, or that this sacrifice would finally demonstrate my value. The futile cycle was broken, not by their transformation, but by my acceptance of their fundamental inability to see me as worthy of unconditional love and respect. David returned home that evening to find me surprisingly calm, despite the dramatic conversation with my mother. I shared the ultimatum and my decision to accept their terms by choosing separation rather than compliance. His response was immediate and supportive, though I could see relief in his expression that the prolonged family drama might finally be reaching resolution. "You deserve so much better than what they've offered you," he said, pulling me close. "I've watched you tie yourself in knots trying to please people who seem incapable of appreciating who you are. Maybe now you can focus that energy on relationships that actually value you." His words crystallized something important about the opportunity this separation represented. For years I had been investing enormous emotional energy in family relationships that provided minimal return. Now that energy could be redirected toward friendships, professional relationships, and personal growth that actually enriched my life, rather than depleting it. The days following my mother's ultimatum brought a strange mixture of emotions. There was sadness for the relationships I had always hoped might develop, anger at the years spent accepting unacceptable treatment, and anxiety about navigating major life events without family involvement. But underneath these difficult feelings was growing excitement about the freedom to define my own values and priorities without constant family interference. Marcus called several times over the following week, alternating between angry accusations and pleading appeals for reconciliation. His perspective on the situation remained fundamentally unchanged. I was creating unnecessary drama during what should be the happiest time in his life, and my refusal to participate in family activities was evidence of selfishness and spite rather than self-protection. During our final conversation, Marcus made one last attempt to convince me to attend the resort weekend and resume normal family participation. He spoke about childhood memories of family vacations and holiday celebrations, describing a version of our shared history that bore little resemblance to my own recollections. In his narrative, we had been a close, loving family with typical sibling dynamics and parents who had done their best to support both children equally. The disconnect between his memories and mine was so complete that I realized we had essentially grown up in different families despite sharing the same household. His experience had been one of consistent support, encouragement, and investment, while mine had involved service, criticism, and secondary status. Neither of us was lying about our perceptions, but our realities had been fundamentally different. When I tried to explain specific examples of differential treatment, Marcus dismissed them as normal variations in parenting approach or misunderstandings of parental intent. The Christmas cleaning supplies incident, which had catalyzed my current boundary setting, was characterized as a practical gift that reflected my independent lifestyle rather than a deliberate insult. His inability to see the pattern of dismissive treatment suggested either willful blindness or genuine inability to recognize dynamics that had never affected him directly. Our conversation ended with Marcus expressing hope that I would eventually overcome whatever phase one was experiencing and return to being the sister he remembered. His confidence that my current behavior represented temporary dysfunction rather than healthy growth revealed how completely he misunderstood both my motivations and the family dynamics that had shaped our relationships. The resort weekend proceeded without me, though I received regular updates through social media posts and text messages from extended family members who attended. The photos showed elaborate meals, coordinated activities, and cheerful group shots that reinforced the image of family harmony and celebration. My absence was barely noticeable in the visual documentation, suggesting that my role had always been more functional than integral. Wedding preparations continued through the spring with minimal contact between my family and me. Occasionally, vendors would call with questions that revealed I had been listed as a contact person for various services, requiring brief conversations to redirect inquiries to appropriate family members. These interactions provided glimpses into the elaborate celebration being planned, complete with destination bachelor and bachelorette parties, multiple pre-wedding events, and a ceremony that would cost more than most people's annual salaries. The wedding invitation arrived in late March, addressed formally, and accompanied by a note from my mother suggesting that attending the ceremony might provide an opportunity for family reconciliation. The message was carefully worded to avoid acknowledging any wrongdoing while implying that my attendance would signal forgiveness and willingness to resume normal family relationships. David and I discussed the invitation extensively, weighing the potential benefits of maintaining some family connection against the risk of being drawn back into dynamics that had proven destructive to my well-being. Ultimately, I decided that attending would send the wrong message about my boundaries and expectations for future relationships. The wedding represented everything problematic about my family's values: elaborate spending on appearance and status, celebration of Marcus's choices regardless of their merit, and expectation that I would participate enthusiastically despite being excluded from meaningful involvement. My RSVP declined the invitation politely but firmly, expressing best wishes for the couple's future while maintaining the boundaries I had established. The response prompted another round of family phone calls and messages, though the tone had shifted from pleading to resignation. It seemed that my family was finally accepting that I would not be returning to my previous role, regardless of the consequences. The wedding took place on a beautiful Saturday in May, documented extensively on social media by family members and guests. The photos revealed the lavish celebration my parents had created, complete with professional photography, elaborate floral arrangements, and entertainment that reinforced their social status and success. Marcus and Stephanie looked genuinely happy, surrounded by family and friends who had supported their relationship from the beginning. Watching the celebration from a distance, I felt surprisingly little regret about my absence. The event appeared to be exactly what my family had intended: a showcase of their values and priorities that reinforced existing relationships while excluding anyone who challenged their worldview. My presence would have required either enthusiastic compliance with expectations I could no longer accept, or uncomfortable confrontation that would have disrupted their perfect day. Summer brought news that Marcus and Stephanie were expecting their first child, an announcement that prompted renewed family excitement and celebration. The pregnancy was treated as validation of their marriage and evidence of continued family success, with my parents immediately beginning preparations to become grandparents with the same enthusiasm they had shown for wedding planning. I learned about the pregnancy through a brief text message from Marcus, sent several days after the announcement had been shared with extended family and close friends. The delayed notification and impersonal delivery method made clear that I was no longer considered part of the inner circle of family relationships. The message included no invitation for involvement or suggestion that reconciliation might be possible now that a grandchild was expected. My response congratulating Marcus and Stephanie on their news was polite but brief. acknowledging the milestone without expressing any desire for increased contact or involvement. The pregnancy represented another chapter in their life story that would unfold without my participation, which felt appropriate given our current relationship boundaries. Fall arrived with news of my promotion to Regional Creative Director, a position that would involve overseeing marketing campaigns for major clients across New England. The advancement represented both professional recognition and personal validation that my skills and contributions were valued in contexts where family dynamics didn't overshadow my capabilities. When I shared the promotion news with Dr. Chen during one of our periodic check-ins, she observed that my professional growth had accelerated significantly since I had established boundaries with my family. The energy you were spending on managing those relationships is now available for your own development, she noted. It's remarkable how much people can accomplish when they stop trying to earn love from people who are fundamentally incapable of providing it. Her observation crystallized something important about the past year's transformation. Removing myself from family dynamics that required constant emotional management had freed substantial mental and emotional resources for professional advancement, personal relationships, and self-development that actually enriched my life. David and I celebrated the promotion with a weekend trip to Martha's Vineyard, where we discussed our own future plans without the constant undercurrent of family drama that had previously influenced many decisions. For the first time, we could make choices based entirely on our own preferences and goals, rather than considering how family members might react or what obligations might be affected. The holiday season approached with none of the anxiety and obligation that had characterized previous years. David and I planned our own Christmas celebration and accepted invitations to holiday parties hosted by friends and colleagues who appreciated our company rather than expecting our service. The contrast with previous years was dramatic and liberating. On Christmas morning, as David and I exchanged thoughtful gifts chosen specifically for each other's interests and goals, I reflected on the transformation that had begun exactly 1 year earlier with a box of cleaning supplies. That moment of humiliation had catalyzed a complete reevaluation of my relationships and priorities, leading to the healthiest and most fulfilling year of my adult life. My phone remained silent throughout the morning, a welcome change from previous years, constant stream of family obligations and expectations. The absence of contact felt like freedom rather than abandonment, confirming that I had made the right choice in prioritizing relationships that valued my well-being over my usefulness. Later that afternoon, I received an unexpected message from my cousin Jennifer, who had witnessed many family gatherings over the years but had never directly commented on the dynamics she observed. Her text was brief but meaningful. "I've been thinking about you today and hoping you're happy. You deserve all the peace and joy you've found." The message reminded me that other family members had noticed the problematic dynamics, even if they hadn't felt able to intervene. Jennifer's support, offered without conditions or expectations, felt more valuable than any holiday gift my parents had ever given me. As evening approached, David and I reflected on the year's changes and the future we were building together. The challenges of separating from family relationships had been significant, but the benefits were undeniable. My career was thriving, our marriage was stronger, and I had developed a sense of self-worth that wasn't dependent on external validation or approval. The woman who had once accepted cleaning supplies as an appropriate Christmas gift, while her brother received luxury watches, had discovered her own value and learned to demand the respect she deserved. The journey had required courage, support from people who genuinely cared about her well-being, and willingness to prioritize her own needs over familial expectations. Most importantly, I had learned that family relationships, like all relationships, should enhance rather than diminish the people involved. Love that requires the sacrifice of dignity, self-respect, or personal growth isn't really love at all. It's control disguised as affection. And recognizing the difference had literally transformed my entire life. The cleaning supplies still sat in a closet somewhere, unused and largely forgotten, but their significance remained as a reminder of the moment when I finally understood that my worth was not determined by how others chose to treat me, but by how I chose to treat myself. That realization had indeed given me the last laugh, though it turned out to be less about vindication and more about liberation. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.